George, is it the heat? You always said the heat was too much for you. But the heat out there in the Pacific, George, is worse. It's pure hell.
Bill is right. The wooded land below looks like New England or Pennsylvania or Tennessee, but it's the jungle. A jungle of creeping vines and twisting trees growing in foul, moist air, fighting for survival, just as our men are. There's heat in there. White and blue and red heat. Men get a bitter, dry taste in their mouths. They're beaten and stunned into silence as they move up the narrow trails, over dead logs and through pools of stagnant water. Pools filled with slimy, soft, rotten leaves and wood. In the open spaces of the jungle, the sun is a painful, bright disk of fire, broiling their skin, scorching the ground under their tired feet. They stumble ahead, forward, up the steep slopes, groping, clinging, crawling, and finally dropping down to rest. They come down with heat exhaustion, more often jungle fever. The water they carry is like stale soup, but they feel lucky to have it. And then suddenly the rains start. They pour down, bringing momentary relief from the sweltering, seething heat. The torrents of water drench the men, and for the first time during the day, they relax. They sit there in the rain and try to forget what they're going through. They smoke and read again their letters from home. Then they go on, and as the rain stops, the ground turns to hot, steaming mud. They slog forward, and days and nights blend into one long stretch of weariness until all sense of time and place is lost. They won't remember how long it took to get to the front, how they managed to stay alive. All they do remember is that ahead of them lies more heat, worse heat, the heat of battle. These smoldering piles of dead mark the endless trails through the jungle. A jungle that is hotter than any furnace.
George, maybe it isn't the heat alone. Maybe it's the dirt and dust that's bothering them. Remember how we used to gripe about the dust? There's worse dust in Italy, George.
And Bill knows. He was there when the Fifth Army was driving up through the Campania. There were stretches of desert as bad as any they'd seen in Africa. It was a fine, dry, choking mass of dust that covered their tanks. The kind that grates between your teeth, scrapes down your throats, sifts into your eyes and piles up on your face. The kind that swirls around you and works into every piece of your equipment. It was bad enough for the men in the tanks, but not as bad as it was for those who had to walk. They looked as if they had just stepped out of flour bags. Underneath their clothes, they could feel the sweat streaking down their bodies and dust cake over every inch of their skin. It got into their shoes, burned their feet, and scraped them raw. Still, they had to march on. They had to swallow the clouds of dust that tanks billowed up in their faces. It was the only cover they could get from enemy fire, and they had to keep going. They were passing through gray towns shelled into rubble and powder. The dust of the advance made them seem grayer still. Some of the men wore goggles and tied handkerchiefs over their faces, but they really weren't much use. All the men talked about was water, a shower, a bath, a cool drink. And still they kept going.
Of course you can find a better job, better pay, better working conditions. A job that isn't hot and dirty and dusty. But George, think of the fellas out there. Just heat and dust and dirt and noise 24 hours every day. We used to say it was noisy at the foundry, but George, close your eyes and listen to the noise of war. That's it, George. That's the way it feels and smells and sounds. That's it. What do you say?
Bill remembers this beachhead in France. The wounded, the wreckage, all that we had to sacrifice. The boat floundering in the surf. The battered duck. The tanks and trucks and jeeps buried in the sand. Some of this equipment can be salvaged, but most of it is lost. You see, George, we've got to advance. And before we advance, we must destroy the enemy's lines of communication. And at the same time, we must keep on pouring supplies onto the beaches. New trucks and guns and tanks. All the heat and dust and dirt our men have gone through will be for nothing if you don't give them a new weapon for every one used up. We need transportation. Transportation to move our men up to the front, to move them from one sector of it to another. All this equipment uses castings and forgings. Gray and malleable iron, steel and magnesium and aluminum. We can't do without them, George. Every single foundry in America and every single foundry worker count. It's up to you. You can bring us victory.
George, look out there. Out the window. It's up to you to make them smoke. We need you, George. We can't do without you. Don't quit on us. We never quit. We stuck to our jobs to the end. We knew that if we didn't, fascism would rule the earth. There wouldn't be any post-war world as you dream about it. We griped and suffered and fought and died. But we never quit.
Come on, Bill. Time to go, Bill.
Don't let us down, George.